Hello, and welcome to TF Cast. Small disclaimer about today's episode. We are going to be discussing some more sensitive topics. We're going to be talking to our guest, Justin Coates, who was the man who was pictured in the image that was going around a few months ago of some Mankato Public Safety officers with their knee on his back. And we are here to let him tell his story and perspective that he's been going through since then, and just throwing it out there that our views are our own. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, my name is Justin, and I am that person in that viral picture. I saw a lot of comments and stuff on like KEYC and everything, and like, oh, I know them. That's 3 officers. That wasn't a real thing. But I promise you, I am that person. So thank you for having me today. I appreciate you letting me come on here and tell my story. This will only be the second time I tell this story publicly. So so I appreciate that.
Well, how about you just go over us what happened that day? What was the circumstances that led to that photograph coming into existence? Yeah,
so that as the stories say, on KYC and Bring Me the News, all those kinds of things, it is a 5-year-old picture. It happened when I lived here in Mankato. I had just graduated from MSU. So I was a proud maverick, a broke maverick, but I was a proud maverick. Still living in my little bachelor pad. My fiance at the time and I had come home from a long day at Valley Fair, and my really good friend, he lived in not the same building but the same apartment complex, and he came over and we were just hanging out, the 3 of us, that night, and she went to sleep, and my buddy and I were hanging out, still listening to some music, just kind of hanging out, and we heard a knock on the door, and it happened to be the security guard. And I should preface this by saying, like, we could hear everything in that apartment. Like, we could hear the people upstairs at 3 a.m. watching TV. They were actually really cool people. They were from Australia, and their time zones were all messed up, so they would like vacuum at random times of the day or of the night, and so like we could literally hear everything. So of course, the security guard hears the music, knocks on the door. I wanted to put my dog away because she was a German Shepherd, and she can get kind of protective. And so once I opened the door, which some time had gone by, I was met with immediate, like, something's gonna happen here, man. And I was kind of like, what's the deal here? And before long, the door was, I was talking with him for like no more than 30 seconds before I see 2 Mankato Public Safety officers come strolling down the steps. It was just that quick. And they switched spots. I don't remember which officer it was at the time, but one of the officers put his foot in my door, and that rubbed me the wrong way, right? And so I politely asked him, I said, sir, can you please remove your foot from my door? And that's when he said, no, I don't do that. When I've done that in the past, people slam the door on our face. And I said, okay. And I was trying to be respectful. I come from a military family. I have people in law enforcement, border patrol, those kinds of things. So I was trying to be respectful. But things were, you have 2 Latino dudes here with 2 white cops. So my buddy decided to record for our safety. That's unfortunately the times we live in. And so I think that really upset them. Because Mankato, my understanding is still Mankato Public Safety doesn't have body cams. So this was for our protection and theirs. And, things just kept escalating, right? Like, you're having a party. And it's like, dude, I guess maybe a party of 3, you could call it that, but we're not having a party. So we kept going back and forth. And then finally it went to, you know what, I need your ID because you're going to be arrested. And you can hear me on camera, see me on camera saying, what am I going to be arrested for? And he's like, we need your ID. And I said, no, you don't need my ID until you tell me what I'm going to be arrested for. Nope, we need your ID. We're not playing this game. And I said, well, you're not getting it. And, he even tried to kick my fiance out, which I said, if you want to wait right here, I'll go get the lease and let you see that she pays it. So I'm like, we're not going to play this game. So they asked my friend to leave, and he says, sure, no problem. Let me get my stuff. If you watch the video, he no more than turns around, and you can hear me. You can't see me, obviously, but I put my hands up because, and you can hear me say, no officer, don't come in my house. No officer, don't come in. And they grab my wrist, pull me into the outside, right, the hallway. And he runs around. And then you can see, their knee on my neck. They're telling my buddy, don't get involved. And he's like, I'm not. You can't hear me on camera. I try to enhance it a little bit, but I couldn't hear it on the video. But I did tell Officer Sergeant Baker, bro, you're on I can't breathe. And you can hear my buddy say, Justin, calm down. And, I'm not resisting. You can see I'm on the ground. And so eventually, I don't know how much time passed. Fortunately for me, it wasn't the 9 minutes that, unfortunately, George Floyd went through. But it seemed like eternity, right? And so before long, I was in the back of the cop car. He asked me to do a breathalyzer, to which I said, was I driving a vehicle? And he goes, are you going to blow on this? And I said, no, I'm not doing a breathalyzer. So, so they had some more talk, conversation with my buddy. They kept asking for my ID. My buddy said, no, you're going to need to get it from him. And then, I was never given my Miranda rights. I didn't even know I was being arrested. They didn't say anything to me. And then the next thing I know is I'm at the public safety center, and they put me in this big room, right? It's like one bench and then big windows, right? So not even a cell or anything like that. It was weird. And they're like, just sit here. And they took the cuffs off me, and I'm like, okay, are you putting me in a timeout or? And so before long, I get put in the back of this vehicle. They're like, your ride's here. And I get in the back of this vehicle, and there's a divider. And I can clearly hear this lady on the other side, tweaking out. And so it was about 10 minutes into the drive, and I kind of knocked on the thing, and I'm like, where? And mind you, this is like 1, 2 in the morning. I knock on the door or on the window, and I'm like, where am I going? And they're like, oh, you're going to New Ulm detox. I was like, what? Okay. So, I was hysterical. I'd never been in trouble. I had just started working in a child protection role, right? I was, all I could play in my mind was, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to, all of these things. And so it wasn't until the next morning. So that happened on a Saturday, technically Sunday morning. It wasn't until Sunday morning at 8 a.m. These other guys were there, and they're like, here, do this, give this attorney a call. So I called this attorney up from New Ulm and paid him $650 to get me out on a Sunday from detox, because you have to be there for 2 days minimum. So he gets me out, judge signs it. The attorney was like, you really need to, I don't handle this stuff, but you should pursue this. So okay. And it wasn't until I was leaving detox, when the people at detox handed me all the papers and whatever that the officers filled out, and that was the first time I found out that I was being charged with disruptive intoxication. And I don't know if you're familiar with disruptive intoxication.
I'm not.
But it's a city ordinance that Mankato Public Safety created. I don't know, 6-7 years ago, because it's a lesser charge than disorderly conduct, but an easier charge to make than disorderly conduct. Basically, the definition of public intoxication is you're in public causing a nuisance and being combative, therefore we can arrest you. So tell me, right, number one, in the video, I clearly wasn't slurring my words, clearly wasn't drunk, number one. Number two, I was in my own apartment until they pulled me into the, right? So I hired an attorney, paid $1,000. She wrote the prosecuting attorney a letter saying, you need to drop this. He said, yeah, sure, you're right. He wasn't in public. That was messed up. But we're actually going to charge him with public nuisance. because he annoyed 7 or more people when 7 or more people didn't even live in the apartment at that point. So, being a broke, recent grad, I mean, I couldn't afford to go to trial and fight. And the public nuisance is like a traffic ticket. So I paid the $200 ticket, was done with it, moved on. But it's haunted me for the last 5 years, right? Like, I've had to live with this, and my brother is a recent officer, and I want to be happy for him and encourage him. But it's like, every time he brings it up, I get a flashback to this, right? Like, that was a messed up situation. I have my opinions on what policing should really look like. So that was, sorry to make the story so long, but that was what happened that night.
Yeah, and what did you held on to that story for a long time,
right?
What changed?
Well, I had seen a lot of stuff happen in 5 years. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it seems like we're seeing something on Facebook or social media all the time about these interactions with police officers across the country. But what really did it for me was what happened with George Floyd. What happened with him specifically because of how the officer knelt on him. And honestly, before George Floyd, I had only seen because there is a video besides that picture, but I had only seen that video once before George Floyd because I couldn't watch it. And then the picture, I mean, so seeing what happened to him was like, I mean, it's the very thing that happened to me, other than I was fortunate not to lose my life. Yeah. So that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak.
Yeah. And what was kind of going through your head when you originally decided to speak out? I know you started with a Facebook post.
Right. Well, I don't know how my settings turned to public. Number one, it originally was just, I have all my posts set to friends, but that one was public. And so, people were cool about it, and said, hey, can we post this? Well, some people just shared it, and other people were like, hey, is it okay if we post it? And when I realized it was public and how much like it was spreading like wildfire, I did take it. I think I took it off, or at least cropped it maybe. I don't remember. But the people that continued to share it, it was cropped, so my name wasn't in it. And because my thought was, I wanted to raise awareness, and I wanted people to realize this is happening in your own backyard. It's happening right here in Mankato. But at the same time, I have a family to think about. I also have my career, right? I'm going to be graduating in the next couple months and be a licensed therapist. Like all of those things were in my mind. Like, I want to fight for justice because it's the right thing to do. But I'm also in a tough situation because if I come public with this, what's going to happen to me and my family, right? What kind of retaliation am I going to get?
Has anything like that happened to you?
I've just started talking about this publicly, so I haven't witnessed any retaliation, personally or professionally. But I guess time will tell, right?
And apart from speaking out on social media, you've done some work with the reaching out to the police. Can you tell us what the experience has been like dealing with public safety since going public?
Yeah, it's been. I don't have many. I don't know the right words to put on that. But they were the ones that originally reached out to me. I mean, when that went viral. I think it was somebody actually that worked with the city. I'm still not really sure what his position is, but he reached out to me on Facebook, and I was like, it was weird that but they were like, yeah, Director Volkel wants to speak with you, and so I was really leery about it at first, and I decided like, oh, okay, I'll do it. So I reached out, and I spoke with Assistant Director DeRose a few times because Director Volkel was in other meetings, and I thought he was real cool about. He listened to me, he did those kind of things. And then we eventually had a Zoom meeting with him and Director Volkel where I got to tell my story. And I showed them the video, which I was very hesitant to do. But I showed them that. And, and this is not a dig on anybody, right? Don't get me wrong. But, when I was talking with Assistant Director DeRose, I felt like he was actually hearing me, and some of the things he was saying felt validating. Director Volkel was very, and I get it's politics and it's because of her job, and I get it, you know, but it was very flat and very cold at the beginning, right? Like, oh, like we, you know, one of the things she said to me was, you know, it sounds like you've been struggling with this for 5 years. Just so you know, we have an employee assistance program where you could take advantage of 7 therapy sessions, you know, like things like that. And I'm like, yeah, okay. You know, I work for the county. I know what an EAP is. Like, that's not what I'm here for.
Yeah, that's a line.
Right. I'm like, so, you know, so anyways, then I think, you know, you guys were covering a Q&A session outside of public safety, and I watched that live, and there was somebody there that brought my story up, and didn't say my name specifically, but asked some questions, and it was Director Vocal very much sidestepped it, right? It was, you know, I mean, part of it was, you know, she was like, well, you know, we've reached out to the individual, and he wants to remain anonymous. But then this individual asked more general questions about the situation, to which she didn't answer, right? She deflected. And so when I was done watching that coverage, I felt like we got a lot of lip service, and, you know, like their responses were the exact reason why people are upset and why I'm upset. And so then this internal review, or this review, was supposed to happen by this outside investigator. And I think the article, you know, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure every article said that Director Vocal said it would take 3 weeks or so. Well, it didn't, right? Like, I mean, this was a long process. I did interviews with this investigator or attorney, whatever she is. And then, you know, a couple months had went by, and I reached out to her and I said, just wondering where you're at with your report, how much longer? And she's like, her response back was, you know, with COVID, blah, 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 and people are, you know, taking some leaves, and it's been hard to, so basically my report will be done in the next several weeks. So you fast forward 2 months, and I just did a public forum with the ACLU and the NAACP, and after that forum, I decided, okay, it's time to reach out again. And I reached out to that attorney, to which she said, yeah, I've completed my report, but I can't give you anything. So you're going to have to reach out to the department. So I emailed Director Vocal and Assistant Director DeRose, and he responded back to me, and he said, you know, they were talking with HR that they would present the findings to me first, and then, because I had encouraged him, I said, you know, I really think you should be transparent with the public about this, that you're following up, that you're doing something. I said that would be one step in the right direction to building trust. And he's like, yeah. We want to meet with you first. Well, we got to talk to our HR, then we'll meet with you, and then we'll see how we're going to present it to the public. And that's kind of where it has ended.
And what time frame was that? That was recently here?
That just happened this week, because it was Thursday when I did that public forum, and then I think it was Monday this Monday I emailed them, and they responded within the day, but that was just this week.
Listening to you speak about your interactions with Matt and Amy, have you had any talk with them about what you want to come out of this? I mean, certainly, like, this is something that they have to deal with,
right?
And the way you will respond to it is something that they'll have to deal with,
right?
Do they have any idea of what that is, or have you communicated that?
Yeah, you know, back when this first started going on, right, and it was going viral, and we had our first meeting. She did ask me if I had any requests or demands. I'm not sure which word she used. And at the time, like, that question was very difficult for me to answer, because it was like, what am I supposed to say? Right? Like, I didn't even want this to get out. Like, what am I supposed to say? So at the time, I had just simply said, I would like an apology from the department. Like, I've had to live with this for 5 years, and you know you guys messed up. Like, an apology would go a long way, which I never got. But I've never had any talks about what I want or any demands or requests since. But I feel like I've been empowered, and I've been listening to other people's stories, and I feel like that time is coming or here.
And, well,
can you outline any of those possible things that you think might? Well, I guess firstly, what would you like to see going forward for other people who might be in similar situations in the future?
Yeah. Well, number one, I mean, you know, if something is, when I posted my story, it was encouraging, I guess is the word, but also disheartening to see that other people had similar run-ins with these two particular officers. And so it was encouraging to know I wasn't alone, but it was disheartening to know that, man, in the 5 years, this has happened over and over and over again. So, one of the things would be that I'd like to see is that, and I know it's difficult because I've been there and I'm doing it right now, but one of the things I would like to see is if you've had an experience with Mankato Public Safety or these two officers, to file that complaint, right? To make your voice known. That's the first step, right? Don't just stop there, but filing that complaint is number one. And number two, the rest is, the other part of it is on the department. We need more than a Q&A session. We need more than handing out water bottles to people so they can go along their walks, right? Like, I mean, I didn't watch the whole, it cut off at some point, but when I was watching it, nobody wanted to take water. I get the gesture, but at the same time, it's like, water's not going to fix the relationship, so we need more from public safety. Be transparent. I get, working for a county, I get, protecting your own and those kinds of things. But when somebody does something wrong, you have to correct it. And you have to be transparent about it. So I would like to see that from public safety. And I think one of the ways to do that is not pretty up and doctor these findings. Make the report known. Whatever that attorney, the attorney did the work. She did the investigation. She talked to me. She said she was going to talk to the officers. I know she talked to Director Volkel. She was supposed to talk to my friend who recorded it, but it doesn't sound like she did. But nonetheless, release the results. Why can't we see it? Right? What did she find out? What is she recommending? That's a great step, and then we'll go from there.
It seems that some of those actions are like a performance and that they never reach any kind of practical application or like you said, they're not shared. So
right.
Just making that a little bit more transparent. And that seems to be a big issue within the, I guess, those systems is that they don't allow for any sort of dissenting opinions within their own organization. So everything needs to be so put together before it can be released, I guess. And they can't like say we made a mistake before because it would compromise their integrity or something, which, you could make arguments about that all over the place.
Right. Yeah. And I definitely don't want to be like facetious about it or anything like that. Right. I think, like my department, we are very sensitive to our current culture in this country and in our rural communities. So I think like my department does a very good job, but not all departments do, and you have to be able to call it out. And it starts from within, right? If you don't stop the bleeding from within, it's just going to spread.
Yeah, and one of the issues that's very difficult, especially with police, is that when groups of people come forward to talk to the police, they're often talking about a broad cultural issue with the police. Sure. And at least in the situation where you had been watching, and Amy was talking to us, she was only willing to talk about specific instances and down to that was in a different county or this isn't the case number. I can't be for sure. And that's not what people are talking about. They're talking about attitudes. They're talking about, the way authority deals with the public and to some extent puts themselves against or outside of the public. Right. And I think that is what people in general have a problem with. And it's very difficult, especially through a single situation like yours, to be like, is accountability dealing with those two officers or all the officers around them who know? Because we know.
Well, it's like I said in the forum the other day, it's a multifaceted issue. It's not just this, that, or the other thing, right? Like we have to hit it on many, many levels. And anybody that thinks differently needs to take a real good look at what's going on. As somebody that comes from the mental health field, one of the things that I am working on and would like to really sit down and have a conversation with, police departments is the way we vet police officers. The psychological testing for and interviewing for police officers is outdated. And you're going to get people, and that's okay. But you're going to get people that disagree with me, right? They're going to say, "Oh, it's great," but they use things like the MMPI, the Minnesota Multi-Facet Inventory. That's like a 350 plus question personality test. At some point, you can't focus anymore, right? And you only get so much from an assessment like that. And then you do an interview, and there's so many more things psychologically that we could do when vetting, new recruits, and even current officers that have been on the force for 10, 15, 20 years. Just because they're in doesn't mean they don't need a psychological evaluation. They've seen a lot of stuff. Right? I mean, as a child protection worker myself, I've seen a lot of stuff, and that takes an effect on your mental health and physical health. So it's a conversation that needs to be ongoing. I mean, there's not just one thing, but there's definitely some things psychologically we can make a lot of improvements on.
Yeah, I can't even imagine all the things that could be done to help the police as they go forward. In that way, I mean, I feel like they have too much work given up to them in the first place.
Right.
A lot of these situations are not ones where it's even appropriate to have.
Yes.
I feel like any kind of social worker could have dealt with the situation of mediating between you and whoever reported it better than those two. I mean, just based on the outcome.
Right.
I got a question. Can you tell me a little bit more about the forum between the ACLU and the NAACP?
Yeah.
What was that like?
So there was there was some other groups that put it on, so shout out to them too. I don't remember all of them, but the ACLU and the NAACP, Bukata is awesome. He was part of the Q&A thing, and he helped put this together also. So it's a 4-part series, and there's 2 more parts that are coming out, and it's all on Facebook. It's live, right? And so this second series that I was a part of, we had this lady Nikema speaking, and she's from Minneapolis area. She had run for mayor like back in 2017. She's a fighter, man. She's a fighter, and she said something on the forum like, I'm tired of coming to the table. I'm tired of coming to the table for meeting after meeting after meeting. She's like, I've gotten to the point where I come to these tables and I start flipping them over because that's the only way that people are hearing me. Which I took that to mean like we need more action and less talk, right? We need to start seeing things instead of just talking about it. But so she talked a lot about various different things of like what she's working on, how we can get engaged, those kinds of things. And then we had a panel that included advocates from CADA. I think that stands for the Center Against Domestic Assault or something like that. So we had a few advocates from there, and then myself, and I told my story on there. The conversation was not like, let's point the finger, but to start a conversation of how can we get the community more involved, and how can we start this conversation about what community policing looks like, and to clarify what defunding the police means, right? Defunding the police does not mean getting rid of the police. Like that is not what it means, because we need the police, right? Like if for various different violent crimes, things like that. I mean, who are you going to call? Obviously, a social worker can't deal with those kinds of things, but it can look very differently. Somebody who's having a mental health crisis doesn't need an officer necessarily to take the lead on that. So it was starting that conversation. So that was a 2-hour thing. It was recorded, so people can go back and get the link. And there's 2 more series that I would encourage people to, because it was talking about the greater Mankato area.
Yeah. And on dealing with violence and property, which is what I see the police as being the main thing that people expect them as an authority figure to respond to, I still can't help but think that you could the job of the police is something that on some level needs to be done, and I'm not sure that the current institution is any longer fit to do it. I'm not sure about that. I just can't. I can't imagine a world. I can't imagine their perception of their own authority being something that's necessary in the rebuilding of how our law enforcement works. I don't know how I feel about that.
Well, it's outdated, right? Like, I mean, like everything, everything is outdated, and everything needs to change. I mean, we get stuck, especially our older generations, right? Our baby boomers and Gen Xers. I mean, we get stuck in this belief, and not all, right? I don't want to generalize, but they seem to be the generation of, growing up, this is what I was told, and we didn't ask questions, and that's just how it was. And if you look at the people that are still in law enforcement, I mean, you have people that have been there 20, 30, 40 years. Those are those generation, and those are the people training our younger people. And so if they still have that mentality, it's outdated, and it doesn't fit with our culture. And so how do you retrain that? Can you retrain that? Right?
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think as Americans in general, we have a bad idea of what authority is and how political violence works in general. The police are not designed to be a punitive arm. They are to escort you to justice. And if they fail to escort you to the court, they fail at doing their job. And the people who want more on that kind of police enforcement in the street side, I mean, to include statements that the president has made about bash him on the head as you put him in the paddy wagon, stuff like that.
But that's a real thing. Like, I mean, I've talked to officers that legit think like that.
Certainly.
Like you just put me through, I know you're saying that, but I don't want people to think you're just saying that in jest. Like that, people really have that mentality. Like, I just chased you down, so now I'm gonna beat you on the head because you deserve it. Like,
certainly
that happens.
And no, that is a crime. As with most things that are crimes, for example, brandishing a weapon at an officer is a crime. It carries a lofty sentence, and it is not execution in the streets by a police officer. Right. And I mean, that's just that. I don't think that they should be doing that. And if their threshold for fear is at that level where they're constantly in fear, they should, get a job that matches their level of cowardice. Yeah. I don't know. It is. I don't know just how I feel about that. But I don't know how we can have that, because I don't feel like people argue or even talk about these things in good faith. No. Because, even having a long conversation about it with you right now, I'm sure we have, slightly differing opinions on the matter. Sure. About how far defunding or abolishing should go. Mm-hmm. But I would still struggle to, find your exact position on it, because it is so multifaceted and complicated, as you said.
Yeah, and I think the honest answer from me is I don't even know what I want, other than what's happening now and what's going on now is not working, right? Like that I know 100% for sure, right? I haven't dedicated my life to studying racial injustice and criminal injustice and all those kinds of things. I haven't, so. I'm a data guy and a research guy, and I want to know all that stuff before I make a complete opinion. But what I can tell you is that I know that what's happening is not working, and on the mental health side of it, because I have dedicated the better part of my adult life to that, is there are some easy things to learn to teach people that would solve a lot of problems, and would vet out. people that think they might be good for being a police officer, right? I mean, we do it all the time, where I'm doing my internship. I mean, and we tell these people, like, if you're thinking about doing this career based on, your testing and like, you should probably not do that because it's probably not going to work out. And those are the conversations we need to have. Like, oh, I'm sorry you went through school for 4 years. I'm sorry you did all that. But I'm going to tell you that based on this, I really don't think being a police officer is the best thing. Like, we need to have those conversations, and it's not happening.
And what about reform from within? Do you, like, I would just, at a blanket statement, say it's probably not going to work at all, but you've been trying for months now. Do you feel handled?
I feel, yeah. I feel like we need to address this really quick because it's going viral, and let me make you feel really good and respond to you, and then nothing, like they were all concerned about, my mental health and how can we assist you, and then, everything kind of died off and everything's been kind of radio silent, and I haven't heard anything from anybody, right? Which is kind of the norm. You might already know this, but when something happens, like a school shooting, or like the instances with George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, or so on and so on, when something like that happens, we as humans tend to forget in 2 to 3 weeks. Like, we get all ramped up and our adrenaline's going, and we're gonna make a change. But people at the top know, if we just wait out the storm for 2 to 3 weeks, their lives are going to go on. They're going to go back to work. The kids are going to need this, and everything's going to go back to normal. And that's what happened here, right? That went viral 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, go back and look. 2 to 3 weeks went by, and everybody stopped talking about it. Look at, aside from the protests, for the majority, like, nobody talks about what happened with George Floyd anymore. It's at least not to the extent that it should be being talked about. And so we need to keep talking about it.
Well, there are certainly a lot of people in Mankato who are still talking about it, but the general public focus being shifted on that.
Right.
But I think that the accountability with American police has been so bad and so on the national spotlight that we've seen some other event happen basically constantly since then. And a lot of the things that were going on in Portland too, I think were very moving pictures for a lot of people to see, what continued resistance will be met with.
Well, and I don't know if you're familiar with, back when I was in high school, I had a psychology class, and they always made us watch this guy named Philip Zimbardo. Don't Google it. It's like so outdated and boring, but he's like your typical like black and white video and like old school psychology. But anyways, he did this experiment where they just gathered up a bunch of people and they made this makeshift prison. Have you heard about this?
I have.
And they basically, said, okay, you 100 people are going to be guards and you 50 people are going to be inmates. And basically the experiment was to see, if one of the guards started beating on this person, would the other guards follow suit? And they did. And these were just average people, right? So you take that kind of experiment and you apply that to like, well, how did the Holocaust happen? Well, that's why, because one person said it was okay to do it, then the other, and it's the same thing here, and that's the police culture, right?
Yeah, I've heard I believe it's called the Stanford prison experiment.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that there's some pretty large errors with how it was held.
Right.
But we have seen very similar things happen. Even Guantanamo Bay, when you listen to the people who did some of the things there and who were in those pictures that were insanely cruel.
Yeah.
They were saying very similar things. It's like, this is what we were while we were there, or like, this is how we behaved, and they weren't human to us.
Right.
But yeah, that's God.
Yeah, I mean, it's
tough.
a tough subject, right? Like, I mean, you could talk about it forever, but my main message is we got to keep talking about it. And, for those of you who, are watching or will watch this, or hear this, I don't know, like it's okay to be afraid, right? I mean, a victim is a victim. And you have to be able to tell your story on your own time. And, there is pressure out there to tell your story because, your story will make an impact and all these other things. But you got to do it on your own time. And there are resources out there to help you with that. But I get the fear and I get the hesitance and the reluctance to do it. During that Q&A session, I almost felt victim shamed because there was a comment that Director Volkel said where she said something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing, but she said something along the lines of, well, that happened 5 years ago. Had we known 5 years ago, had we just known. And it was just like to a victim that's like, oh, my bad. Like, I should have told you, my bad, you would have done something. Like, that's my fault. What happened to me was my fault because I didn't say, you know what I mean? Like, those thoughts start going through your head.
You can take some comfort knowing that they don't have any problem lying about things like that. Like, they certainly
Right.
know when something goes bad, and
Right.
they also know that this could be a problem. Like, I've also worked for the government, and, like, those, like, oh, shit, like, this could be a problem if someone says something moments. Happen in police and military situations.
Right.
I'm not going to embellish on it too much, but that's part of the culture.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to touch back on something you mentioned earlier too, and it's just that time part. Like, now there's been the time that you haven't heard back, and there's some like miscommunication there, despite them saying that they would work on some things. And one thing we've talked about a lot, me and Jacob, is that, like, as long as they can not have another problem come up in a short amount of time, for a large percentage of the population, the problem seems to have just vanished.
Right.
And so, especially in the wake of George Floyd's murder, it was very interesting for me too to know that sort of thing happens in Mankato, because I could imagine it might, but knowing for sure and imagining are two very different things. So
Right.
I guess thank you for sharing that story.
Sure.
Because it's important for people to know and be able to understand what's going on in their hometown, but also, like, how can we keep applying pressure to get these issues sorted out without the statute of limitations of people's attention just expiring? Like, how can we keep applying the pressure and keep talking about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, I think the biggest impacts come when another situation happens. And I think that's really sad, right? You think about, and let's not dive into this because we could be here another 2 hours, but the whole gun control issue, right? Like, one shooting would happen and then everybody was marching, and then 3 weeks go by and then there's nothing. And then another shooting would happen and then we'd pick up where we left off, right? And so it was this sad, disgusting cycle. And I feel like for a long time that's been this, right? Because I had a conversation with my wife not that long ago. It was like last year, and we had been seeing a lot of videos about police use of force and all of that on social media. And then for a while there, I hadn't been seeing anything. And I just told my wife, I was like, wow, we've really switched the narrative. Like, where did all those go? And then all of a sudden, boom, here they are again. So I can't quite wrap my head around that. But it seems as though, people, I think, okay, so let me say it this way. I think there's a lot of people that are opportunists that take these sad situations and use it for whatever reason. I'm not going to project what I think their reasons is, but they use it for their own gain, and I think that's sad. But I think the majority of people, want to do something and they start to do something, but then they don't know how. And that's your question, Willis, is, we get lost and then we feel defeated because what do we do? And I don't really have a good answer other than don't stop what's working. If the protests are working, keep protesting. Don't let up on Mankato Public Safety. they do work for us. They are there to keep us safe. Like, that is why they are not called the police department, right? Like, I had this conversation a while ago, and, however I feel about it, whatever. But they are called Mankato Public Safety to give the image of they're here to protect us. Well, if they're here to protect us, then demand that they protect us. And you do that by not letting up on situations like this. So this story, me telling my story, is not about me. I'm not doing it for fame or notoriety or anything. I'm doing it to keep pushing people to say, this happened in my backyard, and I want answers because I don't want it to happen again. That's the real reason I came out, was because I didn't want it to happen again. And I don't want it to happen again. And, doing these interviews is very anxiety provoking because I don't know what might happen. Right, the retaliation, like I was saying earlier, but somebody losing their life, that can't happen. It can't happen. So whatever you feel, inspired to do it. Whether that's writing your lawmakers or going down to public safety or holding protests, but don't give up. And if you feel defeated, keep going, because once you give up, then that's what they want.
Well, and waiting for another high-profile situation so that you can try and push your agenda isn't useful either.
Right.
Or waiting for another awful video to come out so that you can talk about it.
Right.
I guess in talking about that too, there are a lot of really high-profile ones, like recent examples of George Floyd. And those are very powerful, and there's a lot that have been silenced. And I might draw the connection too that even your story was silenced for some amount of time by just convincing you that it wasn't worth pushing forward.
Right.
Like, you were given a lighter charge, and they were like, "Oh, well, we'll just let you off easy."
Yeah.
But that feels to me like a intentional silencing of what could be a louder problem. And I don't know how to address that, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, well, if you're made to feel like what you have to say isn't important, you believe it, right? I mean, that's with anything. If that's how you keep the victim down, right? That's from anything, from domestic abuse to this to anything. If you make a victim feel like what you have to say is people don't want to hear it, it's not worth saying, eventually you're going to believe that. And then once you believe that narrative, then you stay silent, like I did, because that's, part of it was fear, but that was also my other thing, was like, I didn't die. I didn't lose my life. I got some scratches on my ear and my arm. I got, I was out $2,000. No big deal. I didn't lose my life. I mean, I really minimalized it. Yeah. So, I mean, if you make a person feel like that, of course they're not going to say anything.
Yeah, certainly. And interestingly, some of the things that we've been dealing with here recently, I mean, even just groups that have popped up since the murder of George Floyd, we've been doing some work with Mankato Voices for Racial Equity, and they're basically a platform that is where you just go and you can tell your story about what happened with either a school resource officer or a Mankato Public Safety officer.
Sure.
And then it's hosted publicly as an accountability measure, and this data is also shared with other organizations. I couldn't speak in detail about where that all goes and what's it all used for, but I would definitely suggest checking it out. If you're listening to this and don't know a way to get your voice heard, check out Mankato Voices for Racial Equity. And if you're trying to get out into the streets, Stand Up Mankato.
Yeah.
They've been out there responding to just about every single thing that's happened. And there is always something you can do, and there is someone who cares.
Right.
And it won't always be those super kinetic moments, but people do care. I'm not saying that to anyone in this room, even though I do mean to say it to you, but I mean it to anyone who's listening. Like, people care about what's going on, and they certainly want you there.
Yeah. and it's a gradual process. We are designed to want instant gratification, and that's not this scenario, right? It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of people's hard work, but don't get discouraged. There are people like me in my position where I work that we recognize, what we should be doing, what we could be doing. But we don't have the manpower. We don't have the funding. And part of the problem is you have people at the top, lawmakers who have never been on the ground. They've never been in the trenches, making laws and statutes and dictating where funding goes. And it ties our hands. I work with some great people, and we work crazy hours, and we want to take care of people. But we are people too. And so, that would be my other thing is we have got to put more pressure on our local and state lawmakers, because they unfortunately dictate where the funding goes. And a lot of our problems is funding. We need those to go to the right places.
Mm-hmm. I feel like we're kind of making closing statements. Is that where we're at?
Yeah.
I think that's pretty good.
I'd like to just thank you for sharing your story and for chatting with us, definitely. It was really good to hear your side of things, and appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on, for sure.
Yeah. And you're welcome to the platform. Let us know if you need anything.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you for being on the cast, and we'll catch you later.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.